Oh, shoot. That was the wrong. Hold on a
Yeah,
second.
I was gonna say that's not the one.
Nope. That'll be later. Busy day. All right. Three, 2. Let's see. Get the slide here. In 3, 2, and 1. All right, partner. It's that classic lull that we've been talking about. It's that month-long span in between the end of mini camp or so. It's about 6 weeks, but that's neither here nor there between mini camp and training camp as the Ravens gear up for the 2026 NFL season and Jesse Minter's first year as the head coach of this new operation in Baltimore. We're pleased to be joined by a Believe Network colleague of ours, technically, because he hosts within the network of our audio distribution company that we work with. And that is longtime NFL reporter, most of which has been in or around the New York market, Manish Mehta. So looking forward to bringing him in to have sort of a wide-ranging conversation on his perspective from a national side of things of the Ravens, maybe the division, and even some things that have taken place in the conference over the course of the last few months. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Manish, welcome to the program. We always say welcome inside the vault, and we would encourage our folks to go check you out online if they haven't already done so. That is at Meta Sports. Take us through your career to date, just so that you can familiarize, or our viewers can familiarize themselves with you for those that maybe aren't one of your 60+ thousand followers.
Well, I covered the NFL for the past about 15, 17 years. Prior to that, I actually covered college sports, the Olympics. So I've kind of run the gamut of the sports industry. Right now, I am really excited to be a part of the Believe Network. Between the Tackles podcast I host with Eric Burgess, we have guests really from all corners of the NFL world, NFL coaches, general managers, former players, high-profile media members. In the past month or so, we've had Ian Rappaport, Albert Breer, Peter King was one of our first guests. So we really like to touch on different angles on whatever's happening across the league, and that's what's really exciting. It also gives me a good opportunity to get a little break from chasing around a 19-month-old boy who's got more energy than most of these NFL players. So I'm burning some calories and talking football, which I love to do.
Been there, done that, Manish. Good luck with the 19-month-old. Okay, so I know that you're kind of looking at the NFL at large, and I know you guys covered Patrick Mahomes' new deal with the Kansas City Chiefs, just going well past Dak Prescott, $60 million per year. Obviously kind of sets a new tone for the quarterback market as Lamar Jackson and the Ravens we're assuming, talking a little bit about contracts. Lamar Jackson is probably the most tight-lipped player I've ever covered, and he doesn't have an agent. And the Ravens and Eric DaCosta are tight-lipped also, so we don't get a lot of information. But how do you think that Mahomes deal kind of set up the quarterback market as they are negotiating?
I actually think it's really fascinating, and obviously you guys have discussed this ad nauseum, given that Lamar has never had an agent. Now, he's got advisors, of course, that help him along the process. I think he is in a very unique position. And I know the knee-jerk reaction is, well, Mahomes got this 3-year addition to his current deal. And in a very similar way, the Ravens kind of restructured Lamar's deal a few months back, I believe, moving money to give to him and also free up cap space, very similar to what the Chiefs did earlier in the offseason with Mahomes. And you say on the surface, well, Mahomes is coming off probably his worst season as a pro, also tore his ACL. Why wouldn't Lamar kind of follow that template and tack on a few more years to the remaining 2 years of his contract? I believe he's got 2 years, $104 million left. And what I would say to that, if I were advising Lamar, which I'm not, but I would say if you bet on yourself in 2026, you set yourself up in such a fantastic position for a number of reasons. First and foremost, after the 2026 season, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams will all be eligible for new contracts. And you would assume that at least Caleb and Drake May would get those new deals. Maybe Jay Daniels does as well, depending on how he plays. But those guys essentially are going to reset the market. So if you're Lamar Jackson, I think exercising patience, betting on yourself in 2026, believing that you can excel in Declan Doyle's offense, and then sitting back and waiting for these young guys to get their new deals after the season sets up Lamar to become the highest paid player in the NFL. And that's because he has a really an untenable salary cap charge for next season, which would be his final season under his current deal. It's in excess of $80 million. Obviously, the Ravens are not going to take on that charge. And there's some interesting provisions, as you guys know, in Lamar's current contract. He can't be franchised. He can't be transitioned. I believe there's a no-trade clause. So essentially, Lamar controls the negotiations after this season. And he is in such an incredible position, barring some kind of catastrophic issue where he's injured this year and doesn't play well. But even then, as we saw with Patrick Mahomes, you can still get money. I think if he's patient, plays out this year, gets $52 million, I believe, and then waits for these three young guys to get their monster contracts to reset the quarterback market, then he can come over the top of those guys after those guys' deals are done. And I think essentially a year from now, we could be and probably will be talking about Lamar Jackson as the highest paid player in the NFL.
Can I just do a quick follow-up on that? Sorry, Bobby. Some people will argue, because I get what you're saying with the patient thing, and he'll be if these other young quarterbacks get deals, he'll get even a higher deal. Now, some people would argue that because he came in the league with Josh Allen has, I think almost 40 million more of career earnings because he does the deals more frequently and quicker. And so at the end of the day, though, will they end up, Josh Allen is ahead because he just got a new deal and Lamar hasn't. But is it better to get a lot of new deals quickly, or is it better to be patient like you're proposing and it ends up kind of maybe evening it out in the end?
It's a great question, Sarah. And I think if Lamar Jackson were 5 years younger, I would agree that get the deal done earlier. You can maximize potential future deals because your playing window is obviously larger than being a 29-year-old, which is where Lamar's at right now. I think where Lamar's at right now lends itself to being patient because he's got a boatload of money. It's not as if he's looking for his first big contract. And this typically, as you guys know, teams want to get these deals done first, right? Because they're afraid of the next guy who's going to get a higher contract. And you're seeing that, frankly, at a different position on a different team in Philadelphia. Jalen Carter is looking for a new contract. The Eagles have not given him a new deal, which is unusual for the guys that they draft. They try to lock them up early. Howie Roseman's MO has been to lock these guys up early because he knows that the numbers are just going to keep rising and rising. And we just saw a week or so ago, Jeffrey Simmons get a monster contract that reset the defensive tackle market to a point where now if the Eagles do want to retain Jalen Carter, they're going to have to pay much more than they would have earlier in the offseason. So it goes both ways. I think if you're a younger player, it certainly makes sense to do what Josh Allen did. But at this stage of Lamar's career, and I do think he's got a 5 to 7 year window still left if he can stay healthy. But at this point of his career where he's made so much money, I think the smart play would be to be a little bit patient because of the younger players at the position who are going to get paid significantly higher right after the season.
That would go pretty well just in case. And I don't think anybody's predicting this. If all of this new structure in Baltimore goes below the wayside and blows up, then maybe Lamar doesn't want to be in Baltimore moving forward. Nobody's predicting that. But there have been some that said, hey, maybe he wants to be patient twofold. Not only for the players that are coming up, like you mentioned, but hey, 8 years with John Harbaugh in the operation, he understood what that was better than anybody. And now it's about to be very, very different. Your perspective, given the change in Baltimore after nearly 2 decades with the same guy at the top?
Well, look, I hate saying there's a winner and a loser for this particular situation because ultimately John Harbaugh had a tremendous amount of success, but there does come a time when you need a new voice. In the NFL, frankly, that happens every 3 or 4 or 5 years if you're lucky. The fact that Harbaugh remained for 2 decades and they had a really high level of consistent success really speaks to not only John Harbaugh as a head coach, but the organizational infrastructure, whether it's Derek DeCosta, Steve Bisciotti, that whole group. So I don't think there's any losers, frankly, in that divorce, because I think that John Harbaugh, frankly, is going to do incredible things in New York. And I am very bullish on Jesse Minter in Baltimore. So I think it can be a win-win situation. What I think is interesting from a Lamar Jackson perspective is, it is for the first time in his 8-9 year career, a new guy in charge. And we all typically don't like change, whether it's you're an NFL quarterback or, a dad of a toddler, change is scary for everybody in any walk of life. But the best part about that is when you actually commit yourself to the change. When you look back, the change probably winds up being the best thing for you. And I'm not saying that Lamar Jackson wouldn't have thrived with another year of John Harbaugh, Todd Monken. I think, frankly, if he were healthy, he would. But I do think there's an interesting window for Declan Doyle specifically to unlock a part of Lamar Jackson that we have not seen. It's very similar, frankly, and I'll go back to Philadelphia again. It's very similar to what Jalen Hurts is working with Sean Mannion, another young offensive mind who is highly touted across league circles. These guys, whether it's Mannion and Hurts or Doyle and Lamar, these guys are going to push established, successful quarterbacks to do things, frankly, that they haven't done before. And I frankly think both guys are capable of excelling in these new roles. I mean, there's specific things in the Ravens offense that you'll see this year that you did not see in the past. And I think, just from the outside looking in, I think that Lamar Jackson has the skill set and the mindset and frankly, the football acumen to excel in this new offense.
Given that you're in that New York area, what has been the impact of John Harbaugh with the Giants? And what do you think, he can help that organization do?
Well, there's instant credibility, for all the reasons that I outlined earlier. The sustained success in one place for so long brings instant credibility, frankly, to a franchise that has been lost for a decade. And now this is a franchise that has been successful and won Super Bowls, of course. And, their counterparts in New York, they're much better than their counterparts in New York. But over the last decade, if we're being honest about it and objective about it, they have been a extremely lost franchise, going through head coach after head coach for whatever reason, not successful in free agent signings, not successful in the draft up until, recently. I think the credibility goes a long way. The word culture gets thrown around so many times in sports, but I think for the Giants specifically, they really needed somebody who players can look at and say, well, I'm definitely going to listen to this guy. All I have to do is look at his track record. And you guys know, being around Harbaugh for so long, just the way he carries himself. I mean, if you kind of look up the word leader in the dictionary, in sports terms, he's right up there at the top. The way he speaks, the way he carries himself. I know in the offseason he spoke at a college graduation, and if anyone listens to the speech that he made to the students who are graduating, they'll see in a snapshot of 10 minutes why this guy has been so successful. And I know John, talking to him throughout the years on a one-on-one basis, he exudes confidence, he exudes leadership, organization. And again, just because things kind of went dry in Baltimore doesn't mean that they won't be fresh somewhere else. We saw that with Andy Reid and the Eagles. Things, ran its course, and then he immediately jumped in, didn't take a year off, immediately jumped in to Kansas City, and then has had a world of success. So to me, John Harbaugh was the slam dunk choice for the Giants. It's a coup, frankly, that they got him, and he's got enough energy. I know he's older, but he's got enough energy and vibrancy, I think, to breathe a lot of life into really a proud franchise that has kind of fallen on hard times.
Rewinding a second ago, excuse me, you suggested the idea that Declan Doyle could unlock Lamar Jackson. And here we are looking at a player that is getting ready for year 9, 2 MVP seasons, 3 of which have been MVP caliber, right? He's thrown for over 4,000 yards in one season. He's thrown for 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 24. Shockingly, that wasn't the MVP year. Ask Sarah about that when you get a chance. And then we all know the resume speaks for itself. So when you say that Declan Doyle, and this is a new system, so maybe that's what you're getting at here schematically, that you say that you think Declan Doyle can unlock a part of Lamar that the NFL hasn't seen in close to 10 years of excellence from him. What do you mean by that?
Well, what's fascinating to me about Lamar Jackson throughout his entire career is that I've never actually believed that he got the credit that he deserves for being a quarterback, not a running quarterback, but a quarterback. And you just, Bobby, outlined some of those statistics in that 41 touchdown season. Even after that season, he's always been perceived as a guy who's a great runner. And it's almost as if that season didn't happen and the 41 touchdown passes didn't happen. And I just think that he has so much more to offer as a quarterback, especially now, creeping up on 30. He's not going to run for 800, 900 yards every season for the next 5 years. It's just not practical, right? So, I mean, how can he develop more as a quarterback? You know that it's in him. We've seen it. We've seen the MVP seasons. We've seen the statistics that you outlined. I think things like playing under center, I think being better at play action, improving play action ability, and you're going to see a lot of that in this Declan Doyle offense. You're going to see a lot of play action. You're going to see a lot of it early. And I think if you just go back, rewind a year to what Caleb Williams was before Ben Johnson and Declan Doyle arrived and what he is now, you'll see a much better play action passer. You'll see a guy who is much more willing to be aggressive on first down. So when I talk about unlocking different elements of Lamar Jackson, I think you're going to see him as a much better play action passer. I think you're going to see him be much more successful on first down as a passer versus, just chunky yards running the ball. I think that those are different, little things that he will improve upon. And that's saying a lot, given that the guy won an MVP with the previous offensive coordinator. So it's not as if we're talking about chopped liver here, but there's different elements to his game. He's not a complete player. He's not a perfect player. Nobody's a perfect player. But I think Declan Doyle's job will be to improve the areas that maybe he knows he can get Lamar to get better at, if that makes any sense. I mean, sure. I just think that he's got so much skill set. I've been saying this I'm like a broken record when it comes to Lamar the last 5 or 7 years. I don't believe that Lamar Jackson has ever gotten the credit he deserves as being a smart processor of information after the snap. I think a lot of people look at Lamar, and it's a blessing and a curse to be so athletic. I think a lot of people, put that to the back burner, and they say, yeah, he can throw, but at least in recent years, the last couple of years, he's turned around, hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, and if things get a little dicey, he himself still has the skill set to run, assuming he's healthy. I just think he's a really smart quarterback, and I've always believed that. Coming out of Louisville, I never thought that he, got his just due when it comes to football intellect, and I think that Declan Doyle is a guy who's, they're basically the same age, right? Declan's 30, Lamar's a year younger. The funny part about that is that Declan's younger than Derrick Henry. He's the same age as Mark Andrews. So these guys are contemporaries in so many respects. But I do think that, having that type of youthful energy and intellect from a play caller perspective will really energize Lamar and help fuel him to be better at things that he can be better at as a quarterback that have nothing to do with his legs.
Manish, Bobby knows what he's doing by putting the MV3 question mark because he's trying to rage bait me, but now's not the time. I can't go on a soapbox right now, but I can promise you are making a lot of Ravens fans like you the way you're talking right now about Lamar, because we agree 1,000% about the credit of processing. And I don't even know that he's hit his full potential. So that's why every time he's gotten a new offensive coordinator, he's won an MVP. So we'll see what happens coming up. But in order to throw more, you're going to have targets. Zay Flowers, everybody's talking about him potentially getting a new deal. The Ravens use the 5th-year option, but there's also rumors that they're negotiating, maybe getting a deal done by week 1. One debate that we have around town is if Zay Flowers is a true number 1 wide receiver, given his stature. But when you look at his production, it says that he is. What are your thoughts on Zay Flowers, and what does the wide receiver market look like for him?
Well, I think the Ravens, frankly, would be smart to lock him up because he's an ascending player. Now, you could look at his career arc and say, well, the first 2 years, a little bit disappointing. He was productive, but not the dynamo that the Ravens anticipated when they drafted him. And then last year, you saw much more what I think a lot of people thought he was capable of a year or two ago, coming right out of the chute, coming right out of college. And when you get 86, whatever it was, 85, 86 catches, over 1,200 yards, best year of his career, I think for him, what's been maddening, from my perspective, is just his inability to get in the red zone. I mean, get in the end zone, I should say. He hasn't been a high touchdown guy, and I don't quite understand why. Maybe that's something that Declan Doyle will focus on. But if I'm the Ravens and I see a 26-year-old wide receiver who's ascending, and clearly he's ascending. I mean, whether he's what you want him to be at this point of his career or not is a different discussion, but he's clearly improving as a player. And now you have a new system with a guy who I think is going to, funnel targets to him more so than he has to this point. I believe his target share has gone up each year. If you're the Ravens, you signed him. What else do you have, first of all, in the wide receiver room? I know you drafted a wide receiver in the 3rd round this year. Rashad Bateman clearly has been a disappointment to this point. To me, Zay Flowers, is he a true number one on a team? That's another way of saying, is he one of the top 30, 35 wide receivers in the NFL? The answer to that question in my mind is he's got the potential to be, and he's shown the ability in different stretches to be that player. So much like we talked about earlier about, should Lamar get his deal done now? Should he wait? Should he be patient? Should he not? I think if you're Zay Flowers, I think you want a new deal. And I think more importantly, from an organizational perspective, I think Eric DeCosta would be very smart to lock him up, because if he does have a blowout year this year, he's going to have to pay much more a year from now. And again, 26-year-old, high pedigree player, improved every single year. There's certain elements of his game that need improvement as well. And I think that the new offensive coordinator can bring that out of him. So I frankly would be surprised if they didn't get a deal done before week 1, especially if they're in negotiations and discussing it now. That clearly is an indication that DeCosta wants to get a deal done before the game start.
You were correct in that upward trajectory of target share. 108 his rookie year, 116 2024, and then 118 last year. And of course, 2 of the back-to-back seasons have been over 1,000 yards receiving, and he has been a big-time playmaker for this organization for sure. Sticking with that position group, wide receivers, kind of hard to believe based on the way that they've built teams under Eric DeCosta in recent years, that to this point, the veteran that they almost always bring in, it has not happened. And last year it was DeAndre Hopkins. In the past, it's been any number of players. Sammy Watkins going back, Nelson Aguilar. I mean, we could go on and on. Des Bryant during the COVID season for a cup of coffee. Are you surprised? I mean, look, I guess we're not in terms of what they've done. They've gone day 2, day 3 wide receivers in Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt. You've got 2 new tight ends that are joining them that can pass catch as well. And of course, like we've already mentioned, Zay and Rashad, and we haven't even mentioned like Devontae Walker, for example, who a lot of folks in Baltimore are expecting to potentially have a breakout year ahead of his 3rd season. DeAndre is still out there. Stephon Diggs still out there. There are others as well. Keenan Allen, I believe, is still out there as well. What do you make of the veteran wide receiver market from a league-wide perspective at this point, a month before camp?
I love Diggs. I mean, he's obviously not the Diggs that he was a few years ago, but if you talk to anybody in Foxborough, they will tell you that this guy was a great teammate and a great help for Drake May a year ago. And any, questions or concerns, obviously things went a little bit sour in Buffalo. And frankly, I think Josh Allen needed a divorce, and I think the Bills in general needed a divorce. But when you saw Diggs with the Patriots last year, and I know people in that organization who see him every single day on the field, and the guy was a model citizen as a teammate. And Drake May loves the guy. Frankly, I'm surprised they didn't bring him back after all the off-field stuff was cleared. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. Maybe he ends up going to Washington. We'll see what happens. But I think that he would be the top choice if I were the Ravens. If I were Declan Doyle looking for a guy who can help me in my offense this year, who can help my quarterback, I would go with him. DeAndre Hopkins, to me, you guys saw him up close and personal. There is a relationship there with Lamar Jackson, so maybe that could be an option. I'm not sure Keenan Allen would make a lot of sense, but it's thin. I mean, we're talking middle of the summer here. There's a reason why these guys are still available, but I agree that something needs to be done. It's not a particularly good wide receiver group. Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, for as good as Andrews has been, I don't think those two alone can carry the passing game. What I find fascinating, though, is, and you guys will find this out as the season unfolds, you'll see a lot of multiple tight end sets in this offense. We saw a lot of that in Chicago last year. The Bears, Ben Johnson, loved running 12 personnel, one of the most heavily used 12 personnel teams in the league. And then when you looked in the last couple months, when their rookie tight end Colston Loveland was kind of getting in a groove, they ran a lot of 13 personnel, which is a kind of a new trend in the league. Sean McVay and the Rams are ramping up 13 personnel. And the thinking for 13 personnel is not to just run it down your throat, because, it seems counterintuitive, but teams run 13 personnel to pass out of 13 personnel, because when you have 13 personnel and have your three tight ends out there, defenses are forced to play base defense, which they don't like to do. Defensive coordinators, Jesse Minter will even tell you this. They don't like to play base defense because if you're playing base defense and you have a savvy play caller and quarterback who can pass out of 13 personnel, you have all these mismatches on the field where you have pass catching tight ends against linebackers. You have running backs against linebackers. Now, to me, the Ravens are an interesting situation because Derrick Henry's not really a pass catcher, but Justice Hill could have mismatches. So I think it'll be an interesting offense in terms of how the other wide receivers are used. If they don't bring in another veteran wide receiver, you're going to see a lot of multiple tight end sets. You saw a lot of that last year in Chicago. I would imagine that Doyle would bring that to Baltimore as well.
Okay, you mentioned the Rams. That kind of takes me in a different direction here. It's a twofold question. Okay, so I saw you obviously covered the Rams and Browns trade with Myles Garrett and Jared Verse. People in Baltimore, including Lamar Jackson, did not hide their excitement to get Myles Garrett out of the AFC. Okay, but they are also getting Jared Verse. So I want you to speak to Jared Verse and what kind of impact he could have, number one. But number two, my jaw is always on the ground with the way that the Rams do business and trade away their first-round picks. It is polar opposite from the Ravens and most of the league, but for sure the Ravens, who are so stingy with their first-round picks. So can you speak to that trade and what Jared Verse brings to the AFC North, and then also the way the Rams do business?
Well, I definitely understand Lamar Jackson doing backflips, that he doesn't have to see Myles Garrett twice a year anymore. I understand what the Rams are doing. They're clearly in win now mode while the window's still open for Matthew Stafford. I love the trade for the Browns, and the Browns typically don't make smart trades, but
right.
I love the draft capital. Jared Verse, to me, is a budding superstar, and I think he's going to play at an exceptionally high level for a very long time. Now, will he reach Myles Garrett's status? The odds are likely no, but he's going to be a difference-making player. He's been a difference-making player from the minute that he came into the league. And I know that the Rams did not want to part with him. There was internal conversations about not parting with him, even though they were getting Myles Garrett back. He's a dynamic player. Again, not the player that Myles Garrett is, but not a guy that the Ravens are going to sleep on. Trust me, Jesse Minter is fully aware of how good Jared Verse is. So, yeah, you can exhale for a moment that Myles Garrett's not on the field when you play the Browns, but Jared Verse to me he's a dynamic player who is going to create a lot of havoc. He's tremendous at creating pressure. Now, is he going to get it home as many times as Myles Garrett got home over the last, whatever it's been, 5-7 years? Of course not. I don't think he's a 17, 20 sack guy, 22 sack guy, whatever it is. But he's a pain, and he's going to be a problem in that division for a long time. And
what
as far
a few
as
months for Cleveland.
Yeah, the Ravens, Sarah, it's a great point, because it really does run contrary to what every other NFL team values, and that's draft capital. They value these picks like gold. They hold on to these picks. Just rewind a few months. After and depending on what you believe, after the Ravens got Max Crosby's medicals, or maybe they got cold feet, but the idea of giving up multiple first-round picks is, a daunting thing for general managers and coaches. It's a scary thing. And I wouldn't anticipate that what the Rams are doing would start any kind of trend in the NFL. You're not going to see teams just aggressively trade away first-round picks for star players, even if they feel like they're on the doorstep, because the ramifications, if it doesn't work out, are potentially significant. Now, what I give Les Snead a lot of credit for, and Sean McVay and Kevin Demoff, their president, a lot of credit for, is that despite having this philosophy of essentially doling out first-round picks like candy, they have been successful. Now, they haven't, after the first year with Stafford, they haven't won the Super Bowl, but they were on the doorstep of the Super Bowl last year, and they've really maintained a high level of success, which speaks a lot to their scouting department, their front office, in terms of acquiring talent through the draft in areas that you wouldn't think. Puka Nacua is probably a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, and he wasn't a first-round pick. So they find guys outside of the first round or second round that can really be impactful. So, and it really does put the pressure on decision makers to do that and get it right, because if you don't, you're going to be barren for a very long time. But the fact that they've essentially gone a decade without a first-round pick, and one of the first-round picks they had was Verse, right? And they traded him ultimately. So the irony there is really fantastic. But I wouldn't anticipate that this would start a new trend. But I do respect that they're really bold, they're really aggressive, they understand how great their quarterback is, but they're also smart enough to understand that the window for that great quarterback is closing fairly fast.
Who would have thought that the Crosby saga at this point kind of feels like an afterthought, given the way that the news cycle this offseason's played out through the league, right? It feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a different year, right? So much stuff has happened with the Ravens and with other teams in the AFC specifically. And it is interesting because I know that Eric DeCosta said that there was an internal discussion about not only trading for Crosby, but then signing Trey Hendrickson, and who knows how serious that thought process actually was. But my position has been, and maybe I'm in the minority, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but my position is, you say what you want about the Ravens and how things unfolded with Crosby. I have no problem with what Eric DeCosta did. I have no problem with what the Ravens did. And, even if there was a slight concern about the medicals with Crosby, or frankly, even if it wasn't really about the medicals and they did just get cold feet, the rules of the NFL, lend any team to do this. So if you're going to criticize anybody, I think you should criticize the NFL and the league as opposed to a specific team that's essentially playing within the rules.
And given the 5th-year option that comes with first-round picks, I mean, the consequences would be up to a decade, given what was on the table for what the Ravens were willing to invest in. So we're with you on that. We've talked about that. Speaking of ad nauseum, we've spoken about that topic inside this channel ad nauseum. So, Manish, this was a lot of fun. I can't help but look at, man, talk about a lifetime ago. This is a super cool cover photo of you on the Sports Reporters. Were you a regular panelist?
Yeah, in the last few years I was, and then unfortunately their 30+ year run on ESPN ended. But yeah, I got to meet a lot of great people, had a lot of great conversation. Fun show. It's a show that I grew up on, frankly, and a little surreal to be a part of it for a few years.
No doubt. Sunday mornings, right?
Yeah.
I grew up on that as well. So, hey, let everybody know we have your Twitter account up here, of course, your X account. Anything that you have coming up as training camp quickly approaches that you'd like to tease or push folks once more to your YouTube channel, Between the Tackles?
Yeah, well, we're on at Tackles Pod on all the social platforms. YouTube, we're Between the Tackles, and we are lining up guests. I'm very paranoid about saying who's going to be on, because there's always scheduling conflicts, but we've got some high-profile people over the next several months before training camp begins to talk about various issues. We've got a few topics, I think, that are fascinating, that are related to football, but not necessarily about what's happening between the lines, that I think would be very interesting to people. But just check us out at TackleSpot. You can check me out on X. We'll be promoting that, and we're on Instagram, TikTok, all those wonderful social media platforms that are great for people, right?
Right. Hey, I burnt myself a time or two, by the way, with the whole like teasing thing. Ask Sarah about that throughout our 5 years of partnership. But we appreciate the time, Manish. Enjoy the rest of your off season and have a wonderful summer.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Thanks, Manish.
Done. We're good. Thank you, man. Appreciate the time today.
Nice meeting you guys.
Yeah, likewise. If you ever need any Ravens related stuff, we'll scratch your back for sure.
Yeah, and I'll reach out.